Hello, Pavlos.
Hello, Mario. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Let's see. Okay,
You are in Rome?
yes,
Yes.
I can see you well and hear you well. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation?
I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I can do without it. But I have
let's
to
try
it also to Maria Silvia.
Maria Silvia should be here now. Claudia is
Yes.
here. Christos, I don't know, it's probably a colleague of yours.
He's a student of mine.
Okay. Is
An old student of mine.
duly present through the talk of his master.
Yes.
Okay? So I'll make you, let's do it. I'll make you co-organizer so you can share the screen.
Perfect.
Let's try that.
Can you do it? You know how to do it?
Yeah, you should have. There is in the back, in the bottom, there is share the screen something.
Yes.
Please push that, and that gives you some of possibilities. You can simply share the screen, or you can share the PowerPoint, whatever you prefer. Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, but you can even put it on the put it on a presentation, regular presentation.
Yes, it is on the presentation now.
No, if you go here in the sorry, you don't see me in the bottom, right?
Yes.
Near where there is the minus and plus on the left, if you push on that, will be completely on presentation. Try that. The little thing, you see minus, the minus sign in the bottom right.
The bottom right. And finish. This is better now?
No, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it can work, but we can have it much better. So because I cannot, let's see, it's very small also.
It's very small. So okay.
No. What I'm saying is, look at the bottom where it says 108. You see it? The bottom, the corner, the right.
Yes, but give me a minute. I have done. I should.
Okay. No, what I'm saying, if you go there where it says, no, 108. You see that, right?
Give me a moment. Give me a moment. So I can do that.
Yeah, you can start from the beginning, but what I'm talking is about visualization. Let's see if you go, I don't know.
No.
I'll show you. Look, I share my screen and I show you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I open one of my things here. If you go, can you see my?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
If you push this.
Yes.
All screen. It's you can see much
I haven't found it yet, but okay.
It's on the top there.
Stop sharing the screen and I will try to find it.
Okay. Now, okay, you can.
Okay.
You can share the screen again.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Share screen. Okay. So. Share screen.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And now.
No. It's disappeared. The thing at the bottom. You see.
Should appear at the bottom somewhere. Okay. Here it is.
Yeah.
This is the okay.
Yeah. Push it.
I did it.
I don't see big changes for some reason.
You don't see big changes. But I did it.
Yeah, I saw that you did. Try again.
Here it is. This is all I can do. I did what you did.
Yeah, you're right. I saw that you did exactly the same. Another possibility, try with the, because
Excuse me, Mario. What's the problem now? It's not visible. It's not.
no, but it's much smaller that way.
It's much smaller. So we want. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Let me try something.
There is also visualization in the top menu. One should be with visualization and.
Is it better now or it's just the same?
It's very similar. Probably.
It's very similar. Okay. I will try something else.
Oh, that's already a progress. There was a progress.
There was a progress.
Yeah. Try that again.
But what did I? Screen share, Christoph. Okay. I do it again.
In the meantime, Claudia, are you there? Not yet.
Yes, I am.
So,
Hello.
Claudia is one of the organizers.
Yes, I know. I met her last time.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine.
Welcome here.
We are
Very
fighting with PowerPoint to make it bigger. Another way, if you use the minus plus thing at the bottom right, you go try to move that towards the plus. That's to make it bigger. Should make it bigger. Next to where you tried as I did.
I will do it. I will do it. Is that better? Or it's again the same?
No, it's better. That's a good work, I think.
Okay.
That's perfect. What did you do? Just to have a vague idea.
Okay.
What did you do, Pavlos?
I used another button, just a button like an open book, something.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's much better, of course. Perfect. I also see that you quote the holy text, so that's good. Good starting point.
Yes, I I read these texts last 10 days, and I found them very interesting. That's why I use them today.
Okay. Who's in? Michelle? Michelle is another. We have many organizers. Michelle is here.
It's nice to have many organizers.
Yes.
And Mikkel Croce is a PhD student, or?
Michelle Croce is one of the organizers.
One of the organizers, a faculty member.
Yes, he is a very young faculty member.
Nice to meet you.
He's very young.
I look younger than I am.
Notwithstanding the beard. Okay, we wait some couple of minutes before starting. We are not very, also it's too early. We should start at 5:05 or something. I don't know where Maria Silvia is, that, she was supposed to be here with us.
Yes, she wrote to me some 1 hour ago.
Yeah, she said that she would be, I don't know, let's see. She will come. And so where did you study, Pavlos?
My first, I studied at Leuven Archives of Husserl.
Oh,
My
okay.
background is phenomenology, so I did a PhD on Husserl and Heidegger some, how many? Some 30 years ago. But then after some 10 years in phenomenology, I turned to Aristotelian ethics, and I'm working on that the last 20 years, something. Not far from what you are doing now, although from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm considered to be an Aristotle scholar, specialized in practical wisdom, among other things.
Okay. 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 That's a very wise choice.
It's a consequence of the phenomenological background, because phenomenology is much interested in phronesis, in practical wisdom. But then I left the phenomenologists behind, and I'm working as an Aristotle scholar, so much text-centered analysis of the texts themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Who's this?
Maria
Hi,
Silvia
Mario.
is here.
Hi, Pavlos.
Oh,
Hi, Maria.
Silvia is here. Who is 674226? Strange name.
It asks me to let people enter the waiting room.
Oh,
I
it's
think
well, that's Angelo, a friend who likes to be named with numbers. Also, Johannes is here. He's a dear friend from Warwick. Hi, Johannes. I wonder where Johannes is. Okay. Let's wait 2 more. Maria Silvia, I'll make you. I make you co-organizer. Okay.
Okay,
So you.
so that I can admit.
Yeah, and also you can probably you want to introduce.
Yeah, sure.
And lead the discussion.
Can I
Sure.
just say quickly, sorry to barge in. Unfortunately, I have to go early. I have to leave at about 5:45. Very sorry about that. I just wanted to say that straight away so it doesn't look like I'm making a point.
Okay, so you will be here for 3/4 of an hour?
For 3/4 of an hour, that's right, yes.
Okay, okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Thanasis. Nice to be here. I also need to leave after an hour and a half I teach, so
Okay.
I'll have to leave a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
No problem.
Okay, 1 second.
Couple people is joining.
Hi Mario,
Yeah.
Alessio.
Oh,
Alessio, ciao Mario.
con lo pseudonimo, non ti riconoscevo. Allora.
C'è uno pseudonimo?
Elisabetta, non sembra...
Scusa, è il computer, vabbè, adesso lo cambio. Ok, sì, grazie, scusa.
Prego, prego, non sapevamo.
Dice, ma chi è questa Elisabetta?
Ok.
Saluti a tutti.
Ciao Michele.
Ciao Maria Silvia, ciao Mario.
Oh Michele, ciao ciao.
Ciao.
Saluti.
Bentrovati.
Grazie. Pavlos, you speak Italian or understand Italian?
No, not at all.
You guess.
But saluti is not, it's international, it's not Italian yet. But I speak French, so I can understand or read some texts at least.
Sì.
Very well. Mario, what do you say? Should we start on time or?
No, I would wait 3 or 4 minutes because people keep entering. Also,
Yeah,
there is a way of taking off the noise. I never remember of people who enter. Sophia knows this secret. Otherwise, everyone.
I know that I've done this now.
Okay, so you are in charge. Take it
Yes.
off. the
You
sound.
made me co-organizer. That's what co-organizers do. Yes, much better without the sound. Okay, I see there's more people coming in, so.
Small people. What do you mean? More people, not small.
Yes, there.
No, no, I don't know if they're tall or not, but I can see that from here.
All the Italian friends come from Genova or Rome, or also from other universities?
Oh, no. Let's see. Two different universities in Rome, just to start.
Mhm.
And also some people, I don't know, Ilaria, I don't know. Ilaria, where are you from?
Well, originally I'm actually from Genova, but I'm at the University of Dublin, University College Dublin.
Ah,
Yeah, we met at the last Aretai conference in Genoa with Ilaria.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Actually, there are three different universities in Rome. So this counts probably. And Michele is in Bari, yes. So
Mhm.
there is a plurality. And then some people, I don't know, perhaps could be from some other exotic place.
There are some PhD students from the FINO program, which is the program we share with other Northwestern universities.
Mhm.
You can see some of them. And of course, there's Ariele from Florence, the third person involved in your talk, I'd say.
Okay. I think it's...
Yes. I want to say thank you to the organizers and thank you for your talk, but I'm sorry, I apologize, but I can't open the webcam, but I listen for
Okay.
this.
For obvious reasons, we can hear.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Okay, I think we can start. Maria Silvia, why don't you introduce?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so welcome everybody to this second meeting of our moral philosophy seminar. We're very happy to have today Pavlos Kontos here. Pavlos is a professor at the University of Patras, Greece, and is also department chair, if I'm not wrong. And he's published a great deal on Aristotle, on many things concerning Aristotle's moral realism, Aristotle's theory of action. And he has just published this beautiful book I've started to read in the last days on Aristotle on the scope of practical reason. So we are really happy to have him as a speaker. And I'd say I leave the floor to you, Pavlos.
Thank you, Maria. It's an honor, it's a pleasure to be with you. As you may have noticed, I changed the title of my talk. I added a subtitle. So the subtitle is Phronêsis as Ethical Expertise. The reason is that in the meantime, I had the opportunity to read a couple of papers by Mario De Caro, Maria Silvia Vaccarezza, if I pronounce it correctly, Ariele Nicoli and others, in which they have submitted the idea that practical wisdom, understood as ethical expertise, I quote, has a priority over ethical virtues, is manifested at various degrees in different domains, and its description can be given in terms of clusters of traditional virtues. Hence, habituation under the guide of the wise should be constituted from the very beginning as habituation towards ethical expertise. I wholeheartedly embrace their proposal, and as far as I can see, my own research findings the last years dovetail nicely with it, but also may shed fresh light thereon. Today, then, I will put effort in showing how what they call virtue molecularism, may get substantial support from Aristotle's ethics and in general may be enriched and solidified regarding both its philosophical premises and its practical applications. Who knows, we may write a paper together in the future. I think there are three outstanding issues in their approach. First, how uniform practical wisdom is. Second, how exactly is habituation towards practical wisdom to be established? Third, what sort of ethical states are required in order for the habituation towards practical wisdom to be possible? That practical wisdom, phronêsis, may be portrayed as an ethical expertise, I admit. But this cannot be the end of the story, for it gives minimal information about the various functions of practical wisdom itself, and seems to take for granted that practical wisdom is a seamless, undivided expertise. Further, though the model of skills is not entirely inappropriate for explaining practical wisdom, it cannot be the end of the story either, for it risks blurring the critical differences between practical wisdom and the productive or craft life skills. In the previous talk, Christian Christiansen presented a conceptualization of phronêsis as a four-component construct. Notwithstanding its merits, however, this construct is, as far as I can see, very restricted, not to say impoverished. Please let us give then a look at Aristotle's model of practical wisdom. I do not mean to bring to the surface hidden aspects of phronêsis. This is not today's goal. It's a simple and rudimentary, so to speak, albeit detailed diagram of practical wisdom spokes as they are presented in the Nicomachean Ethics. Practical wisdom incorporates knowledge of universals, perception of particulars, to grasp life as a whole, correct judgment, correct deliberation, correct deliberate choice, prescriptive power, and cleverness. I suppose there is no need to explain these spokes one by one, and it's not my topic today either. If you have questions, I can answer them later. They correspond to very specific Aristotelian notions and are more or less extensively analyzed in a number of passages in the Nicomachean Ethics and elsewhere. Let the following comments suffice for now. Why spokes? For they denote different constitutive functions of practical wisdom. In one of these functions not properly shaped or developed, the aged don't possess practical wisdom in the full sense of the term. In addition, the deficient functioning of each one of them also affects the function of the others. None can substitute for any other. They may not be of equal importance, but none is a mere luxury either. The scheme is getting more complicated once we introduce the reference to the ethical virtues to correct desires. All the more so to the extent that Aristotle famously maintains that no one is practically wise without the ethical virtues. And in a certain sense, this is the puzzle that triggers Mario's and Maria's virtue molecularism. They reject the view that each ethical virtue has a proper local domain because such a fragmentation of ethical virtues makes it impossible to understand how practical wisdom, retrospectively and magically, so to speak, could ever bring a certain unity upon the virtues, nor how practical wisdom could ever emerge in the first place. They conclude that practical wisdom has priority over the virtues, even though it is each time practiced within the domain or in tandem with a particular virtue. I totally agree, but I invite them to realize that this is not enough. On the one hand, ethical virtues have indeed different domains of exercise, involve different desires, different feelings, and for the most part manifest themselves in different sorts of transactions. One can hardly deny this state of affairs. On the other hand, practical wisdom, though unitary it is, entails so many components or spokes that to describe it as a single expertise manifested at various degrees pays lip service to its intrinsic richness and complexity. The upshot is that virtue molecularism misrepresents, at least in part, its own discovery, namely the very habituation towards practical wisdom. We need, for that, a much less flat description of practical wisdom itself. I submit that my emphasis on the scopes of practical wisdom provides the needed refinement. See why. First, though practical wisdom in its perfection entails the perfected function of each and every spoke, nothing necessitates the simultaneous establishment or acquisition of all spokes. By contrast, practical wisdom does not only grow by degrees of intensity, as virtue molecularism maintains, but also and primarily at different moments and extensively. By nature, certain spokes are expected to grow and should grow earlier than others. Here are 3 examples. It's pretty likely that to properly envisage our actions in light of our life as a whole is a highly delicate capacity we can only acquire at the final stages of our habituation towards practical expertise. The same holds true in the case of phonetic perception. As in the case of the crafts, the accuracy of our perception and discernment of particulars is the hallmark of true experts, not something accessible to inexperienced novices or something one can learn by reading textbooks. On the other side of the spectrum, capacities that are responsible for good reasoning, like good deliberation, may be quite accessible to inexperienced people as well. For these are intellectual capacities we exercise throughout our everyday life, in crafts, sciences, and morally relevant actions alike. For the most part, Aristotle says they are teachable in the same way in which mathematics is. But second, more importantly, each one of the spokes of practical wisdom has a strong affinity with a particular ethical virtue or with ethical virtues that belong to a particular cluster. I mean that the habituation towards practical wisdom as an ethical expertise admits of a certain fragmentation, in the sense that its spokes are of different nature, and by consequence, the habituation towards them involves or implies different ethical virtues too. Hence, it proves once again that the habituation towards practical wisdom does not constitute a sync process or an exclusively intensive magnitude, but is ramified in several virtue-dependent processes of habituation towards the spokes of practical wisdom. Again, let me offer some tentative examples. Knowledge, for example, of universal principles and expertise in phonetic deliberation may be much more strongly related to the ethical virtue of justice and to practices in the relevant domain than, say, to the ethical virtue of courage. The scientific nature of justice and its being represented by analogies, mathematical analogies, explain why this is so. Thus, it is by getting experience in such a domain that we may easier and more efficiently cultivate these 2 spokes of practical reason. By contrast, the development of phonetic perception and on phronêsis prescriptive capacity may be much more efficiently nourished in circumstances that invite us to show courage. The former is so to the extent that it is usually difficult to discern the right mean of fear and confidence in complex situations, and the latter because courageous behaviors often demand immediate reactions. So immediate, Aristotle says, as if there were no need or time for deliberation at all. Or, for instance, in order to get the expertise of properly incorporating your actions within a view of your life as a whole, it may be highly important to be exposed to circumstances and challenges that are connected with the ethical virtue of friendship. For it is within the terrain of true friendship, Aristotle says, that we grasp ourselves and the other selves as we truly are throughout the activities our life is devoted to, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is that there is plenty of space to sidestep the localism and the fragmentation of ethical virtues and at the same time respect the richness of practical wisdom spokes. We don't run anymore the risk of creating a gap between the supposed localism of ethical virtues and the unity and unitary function of practical wisdom. For according to my proposal, it is the multifaceted relationship between practical wisdom spokes that explains how one should correlate practical wisdom with particular ethical virtues, not the other way around. By installing differentiation within practical wisdom itself, the shadow of localism disappears and the mystery of practical wisdom's unitary mechanism evaporates. Things are, however, more complicated. For practical wisdom does not only involve a number of constitutive faculties, it is also ramified according to the terrain of each exercise. The Nicomachean Ethics, Book 6, Section 8, shows why it is so. The diagram comes from my last book, Aristotle on the Scope of Practical Reason. I will skip the details and issues of textual reading. As you can see, Aristotle differentiates here 4 sub-branches of practical wisdom. A narrow, so to say, practical wisdom concerned with oneself as an individual, household management, legislation, and politics in the narrow sense of Tagespolitik, that is, practical wisdom exercised within political life, no matter whether we serve as mere citizens or we possess political power. All these sub-branches of practical wisdom are expected to encompass both knowledge of universals and knowledge of particulars. Without the former, they would not constitute forms of true practical knowledge. Without the latter, they would not constitute practical knowledge. In all cases, Aristotle calls the universalist component legislative science or political science. But though the same universalist component is shared by the 4 sub-branches of practical wisdom, their particularist components diverge, since their activities, the particulars they deal with, and the sort of experience, empiria, experience underlying the relevant knowledge diverge too. This divergence is of primary importance for my today argument. To possess one of the sub-branches of practical wisdom is not predicated on possessing them all, for the simple reason that it might happen that you do not have experience of the pertinent particulars. For instance, in the city or today in your state, in the state where you are living, there might be no opportunity for you to undertake political rule or legislation. It is also worth pointing out that the kinds of experience proper to these 4 branches of practical wisdom are structurally disparate, for the distance or the gap between particulars and universals is not necessarily of the same width in all of them. I give 2 examples. Political science provides us, for instance, in Politics Book 7, with a much more precise theoretical account of political particulars than the schematic account offered by the Nicomachean Ethics of the components of morally relevant actions. And hence, one is entitled to assume that the moral perception exercised by the practically wise people regarding their own actions has for the most part a tremendously open and ambiguous terrain of particulars to factor in, while the legislative perception exercised by the legislator can much more substantially rely on the universal knowledge concerning the sort of constitutional relevant particulars. For instance, finding out which is the correct site for a particular city may prove to be a more theory-laden enterprise than finding the mean in questions of courage. In addition thereto, Aristotle submits that the experience of the would-be legislator cannot comprise only cognition of facts about particular cities and constitutions we have lived in, but also cognition of cases far beyond the reach of what we have personally witnessed. Therefore, the pertinent experience cannot be the outcome of our own perception, but necessarily includes a sort of indirectly obtained knowledge about cases set forth in historical testimonial or political textbooks. You may accept, you may reject Aristotle's specific sub-branches and the concomitant distinction between 4 aspects of our practical lives and 4 domains of practical activity. Be as it may, the philosophical interest lies elsewhere. It lies in the fact that different exercises of practical wisdom are grounded in different sorts of experience, and that the right way to distinguish these sorts of experience is by identifying the exact sort of relationship between particulars and universals that applies in each case. Further, the previous diagram illustrates 2 principles. First, the multi-accessibility principle, that is the idea that practical knowledge as the universalist component of practical wisdom is accessible on the basis of each one of the different particularist or experiential components of the 4 sub-branches. Thus, one can attain practical knowledge as the universalist component of practical wisdom thanks to the appropriate education and the appropriate experience, be it experience regarding our own actions or matters of household or everyday political decisions or legislative activities. Second, the irreducibility principle, the idea that the particularist components of the 4 sub-branches of practical wisdom are different in kind, and hence nobody can acquire one of the sub-branches without also having the specific experience that is proper to it. Let me summarize my claims up to now. The unitary function of practical wisdom does not contradict the plurality of ethical virtues and the consequent plurality of their domains of exercise, nor does it oblige us to envisage practical wisdom as a seamless, uniform, and undivided expertise. Habituation towards practical wisdom does not only grow by degrees of intensity. It grows at different times and in different directions according to the structural variegation of practical wisdom and the nature of each one of its spokes. This is also the clue for diversifying the ethical virtues and their role in the habituation towards specific spokes of practical wisdom, as well as for diversifying the sorts of practical experience we should acquire in order for the pertinent habituation to be successful. Be patient. There is still more differentiation within practical wisdom. I mean to point to the well-known problem of how not to be trapped in the following supposed vicious circle. On the one hand, in order to acquire practical wisdom, one should already possess the ethical virtues. That is, to have a view to the noble, the kalon, that is, to recognize goodness in its attractiveness. But on the other hand, there is no mechanical or motivationally neutral way to acquire the ethical virtues. That is, they amount to nothing unless they are already practices of practical wisdom. For to be virtuous, Aristotle says one should not only do what the practically wise person does, but also to do it virtuously, that is, for the sake of the noble. What sort of motivation and desires are required at each stage of our habituation towards practical wisdom? Does habituation towards practical wisdom entail the same motives we encounter in the practically wise person? Their only difference being a lack of, say, reliability and stability? Or rather, what is needed is just for the learner not to have vicious ethical habits that would stem the process of habituation. To avoid the vicious circle, Mario De Caro and Maria Silvia Vaccareccia emphasize the fact that habituation towards practical wisdom requires, I quote, the presence of moral exemplars as objects of admiration, emulation, and sustained exploration, end quote. I wholeheartedly agree. But to invoke the need to rely on moral exemplars undershoots the target of explaining why recognizing them as objects of admiration and emulation does not presuppose the prior possession of practical wisdom. How could one recognize the noble, and all the more in a particular instance, without already possessing the very demanding capacity of phronetic perception? And how could someone recognize the noble unless they are properly attracted by it? Yes, practical wisdom comes in degrees, but the tricky problem with exemplars is that we should somehow explain why to recognize moral exemplars does not require, not yet, the possession of practical wisdom nor of full ethical virtues. I submit that to resolve the puzzle, one should identify a specific spoke or a cluster of spokes of practical wisdom that is par excellence responsible for our recognizing moral exemplars or moral praiseworthiness, and at the same time precedes the establishment of practical wisdom in its perfection. I submit that comprehension, synthesis, is the spoke we are on the lookout for. I skip again the textual references, the interpretive questions, and so on to only accentuate what is relevant to today's argument. We are spectators, not only doers of morally relevant actions, and qua spectators, this is a term I borrow from Aristotle's rhetoric, we use reason to judge practical matters that do not involve our action plans, do not coincide with our present motives of action, and do not issue inactions at all. Such judgments are practical, not theoretical. And all rational agents, a beast-like person aside, perform two different sorts of tasks within the practical domain. That of an agent involved in actions and that of a judge or spectator, and accordingly make two distinct sorts of generally practical judgments, the first being motivational and prescriptive, and the second being non-motivational and non-prescriptive. The former ones require phronêsis, the latter one require synthesis, comprehension. That's my statement. The above argument intersects my today's line of thought. See why. First, it consolidates the idea that practical wisdom admits of a certain differentiation regarding the domain of its exercise. We function as spectators whose judgments about practical matters do not issue in actions when, for instance, we judge actions done by others, either as an eyewitness or relying on their sayings, when we evaluate our own past actions, or when we praise or blame in general. Notice that these are not practices where each one is free to be more or less capriciously engaged in or not, but are inescapable in practical life. In his rhetoric, Aristotle points out that in the context of rhetorical speech, judges exercise the intellectual activity of judgment about practical matters that fall outside the sphere of their own actions. Their judgments are non-motivational, for they are not envisaged as triggering their actions at all. That is to say, they do not concern the ambit of deliberate choice, but only the ambit of spectators' judgments. Recognition of moral exemplars, I submit, is of the same sort. Second, this idea, this emphasis on comprehension, substantiates the claim that different spokes of practical wisdom require different kinds and different degrees of ethical virtue. Indeed, the rhetoric focuses on feelings, pathy, as what influences our non-motivational judgments, not as what influences our motives for action. And hence, it allows that feelings may not mold our prescriptive and our merely judgmental capacities in the same way. Thus, certain feelings might prove sufficiently well-balanced or well-shaped for us to serve as fully reliable spectators of practical matters, though the same feelings are not sufficient to enable us to serve as fully virtuous agents. For instance, friendliness, philia is the Greek term, as a feeling described by Aristotle in the Rhetoric, though it requires some sort of ethical virtue, does not at all coincide with the ethical virtue of friendship. The former, friendliness, concerns our capacity to issue correct judgments about the actions or the character of people with whom we often have no immediate acquaintance. The virtue of friendship concerns our capacity of correctly undertaking common actions with our friends for the sake of the noble. One can hardly miss that the former is much less demanding than the latter. Third, there is room in Aristotle's rhetoric to show that the noble is accessible from both the perspective of the agent involved in action and the perspective of the spectator or judge, but, and this is crucial, in two different ways. No doubt, from the perspective of the philosophy of action, the noble and the desire for the noble are elements in good deliberate choice itself. In the Nicomachean Ethics, we read that the noble is the end of action and the target of virtue. The virtuous person, Aristotle says, acts for the sake of what is noble, since this is the end characteristic of virtue. And indeed, the formula for the sake of the noble is one of the most persistent mottos of Aristotle's ethics. But no such idea is expressed in Aristotle's rhetoric, and in particular in Rhetoric 1.9, the chapter devoted to epidictic speech. It can be no coincidence that Aristotle never uses the expression for the sake of the noble there. Judges and spectators of moral matters do not envisage nobility as the end of some actual action they undertake. Their job is to accurately judge about the noble or shameful. Yes, to see the noble, one must have a certain acquaintance with the interconnection between goodness, choice-worthiness, and pleasure. And one cannot have such an acquaintance unless one already has some experience of the noble from within the sphere of one's own deliberate choice. That is why a base person is never a good judge of nobility, and likewise never displays comprehension. In that sense, spectators' capacity to see the noble is partially dependent on their experience as agents. Or in other words, just by listening to a speech, however dexterous the orator is in setting the issue before our eyes, nobody could ever gain access to the noble in the full sense of the term. But the prerequisite is the same we encountered earlier. That is, both the capable comprehender and the good listener or judge should display good enough ethical virtues in order to be able to correctly recognize true goodness. But good enough is obviously less demanding than the criteria one should meet in order to be practically wise. Habituation towards practical wisdom is possible because, among other things, our habituation towards our becoming good spectators and judges of practical matters, or moral exemplars, is less demanding in terms of ethical virtues than our habituation towards our becoming good agents of morally relevant actions. And hence, the former should somehow precede the latter and pave the way to it. Let me sum up. The main thrust of my today's argument was that practical wisdom manifests a structural variegation that dictates how one should conceive of the structure, the condition, and the process of habituation towards practical wisdom. First, practical wisdom involves a number of spokes structured in such a way that they grow par excellence at different times and in connection with the exercise of different ethical virtues. Two, practical wisdom is practiced in different domains that require different sorts of experience in the sense of different sorts of intertwinement between knowledge of universals and knowledge of particulars. Three, practical wisdom functions differently according to whether we serve as agents or as mere spectators or judges of moral matters. And the second task is less demanding regarding the presence of ethical virtues, though not independent from it. The above distinctions allow us to provide a rich, refined, and detailed account of why the habituation towards practical wisdom amounts to habituations towards practical wisdom spokes. And I hope they offer a stepping stone to a richer formulation of virtue molecularism. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Pavlos. It was a really great talk, and at least from my point of view, it was really useful in terms of clarifying our account, and it was very generous of you to discuss our view and to suggest so many useful clarifications and additions. So maybe we can discuss this later on, but first I want to see if there's questions from the public, from our today's audience. There's one question, Mario.
Yes, thank you very much, Pablo. So Maria Silvia already said that. I found it very rich and interesting and useful for us. And I want to read the paper. If you could send me the paper, I could be more precise in my discussion. I can write questions, more precise questions to you, or so please send me the paper if you want.
Yes.
So we have, I think, a difference that is in when you talk about the spectator, we have a paper with Maria Silva about the interpreter. I suspect that they are not the same. So I would like, but I want to think more about this difference because I think there could be an interesting different points of view there. One question I have, two. First, how do you, in Italian we say phronêsis, in English we say phronêsis. How do you say it in Greek?
In modern Greek, we would read it phronêsis.
Phronêsis?
Yes.
And what about the old Greek, ancient Greek? Phronêsis.
We read the same way.
Okay.
We read it the same way. Yes.
Okay, so the Italians are right and the Anglo-Saxons are wrong. Okay, that's interesting. And another thing is, so you say that virtuous states, virtuous ethical states can be acquired only if one has the motivation for the noble. I have this is one of the reasons why Maria Silvia and I have talked about clusters of virtues, because we can think of an example like this. So Hitler was very nice with animals, but he wasn't very virtuous. He wasn't oriented very much towards any noble. He didn't have that in mind, but he had that virtue, one virtue. Certainly not depending on the fact and not connected with the fact that he was oriented towards the noble in no serious sense. So Maria, in order to avoid this kind of situation in which one could say, oh, at least it was virtuous in that sense, we could say that's ridiculous to think that such a monster could be virtuous in one sense. You need a cluster of virtues in order for that to make sense. I don't know if you accept this or how.
I completely accept this, but there is, to my mind, the target of this distinction is the following one. I think there is a type of agent in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics and the Politics who is underestimated, and this is the enkratès, so the self-controlled person. And to my mind, the self-controlled person and the practically wise person are exactly the same as spectators of moral matters, though they are not exactly the same as agents. So Aristotle would say that the practically wise person is better, more reliable than the self-controlled person, though both of them understand the noble. But I think that in the rhetoric and elsewhere, there is much space to say that as judges or as spectators of moral matters, so of moral exemplars, for example, they are exactly the same. The enkratès has nothing less than the practically wise person. As I like to say, they share the gold medal. There is no way to differentiate them. So for me, it's very important that there is one kind of person who is the same with the practically wise one without being the same in terms of agency. So when motivation comes into play. So this is the only kind of person who can be absolutely reliable spectator of moral matters, as the practically wise person is. So there is no problem with Hitler in Aristotle. He would not be a virtuous person at all, and he would not ever be any good spectator either. He would never have an access to the noble. But I invited you to think the following. If you accept my distinction between the practically wise person and the self-controlled person, then you can somehow structure habituation towards practical wisdom and understand the self-controlled person as a stage towards that final perfection of practical wisdom. And if you accept that, then you can use that model in order to explain more exemplars. So the self-controlled will be able to fully understand the nobility of a moral exemplar without being yet practically wise. And for me, I think this is very useful for you, because if someone is already practically wise, he does not need the exemplars. If in order to understand the nobility of an exemplar, you already need practical wisdom, this is a vicious circle. But my model of the self-controlled person as a perfect judge or spectator of moral exemplars, as far as I can see, gives a way out of the vicious circle. Do you follow my argument?
Yeah, very interesting.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I have to think about it, but I think it's very promising. Thank you. Oh, one question, and then so your view, you think that you are interpreting Aristotle, or are you going your general view, or you are offering your own view? Is it more?
No, I'm an Aristotle scholar, so I think I have textual evidence for everything I said today.
Yeah, no, but my question is, you think you are going beyond Aristotle, or everything you say is more or less an interpretation of Aristotle?
Too much, a very delicate question, Mario. Let me say the following. I try to respond to actual, let's say, questions, but I offer a very close reading of the texts. So if you read the book, I can send you the book. It's a very complicated book for Aristotle scholars. I explain all the terms. I give all the interpretations for antiquity still today, and I think I have something to say about how to interpret the text itself, although I am always involved in current discussions about virtue ethics, moral realism, and things like that. But I think that I can offer a text-centered, let's say, a foundation or ground for your moral, how you call it, virtue molecularism. So I think there is in Aristotle much material in order to ground your own, let's say, more abstract and less Aristotelian account of Aristotle.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next question from Angelo.
Excuse me, Maria, just one more comment.
Yep.
You know better than I do, Mario and Maria, that they try today to give a model of practical wisdom as Christensen did last time, and they pick out just 3, 4, 5, the maximum spokes of practical wisdom. I think this is a bad strategy. The more spokes you have, the more flexible is the system. If you want to develop something, a very complicated capacity like practical wisdom, the best strategy is to differentiate it in, let's say, sub-skills or, let's say, different skills. That's why I emphasize the fact that we can find in Aristotle at least 8 spokes of practical wisdom. There is no need to make them 5 or 4 or they are 8, at least 8. And that gives much flexibility. Much flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay.
I agree with that, but I have to leave the floor to Angelo, I guess. 6, 7, 4, 7 should be Angelo.
Oh, well, I have a question. Perhaps it's connected with the answer of to the question of Mario. I have written something about the topic of phronêsis or prudentia, according to Aquinas, and fortitude, courage. It is not possible to think a phronimos without fortitude, but we may say courage, perhaps, no? In Aristotle. No? Yes, because I think that in the modernity, we think phronêsis without fortitude. So we can do everything in order to change. The name is the same, but something changed. No? So what do you think about this? Perhaps it's something you have said now, but because there is a step, fortitude, and then but do you understand what I am saying? That there is, in order to be phronimos, you have to be also courageous, strong. This topic is also in Kant's strength. There is the topic of the strength of the man, no? It's necessary in order. What do you think about this topic in order?
I think, yes, I'm an old-fashioned person. I think that you cannot be practically wise without having the ethical virtues. But what Mario and Maria try to say is the following. When you see someone and you say he's or she's virtuous, what you say, in fact, is that he's courageous. That means he's practically wise in exercising courage. He's just, that is, he's practicing practical wisdom in exercising justice, and so on. Please turn off your... There is a problem with sound. You should mute. Okay, thank you. So what they say then is that each time we attribute to someone an ethical virtue, at the same time, we attribute to him practical wisdom. There is no way to do otherwise. But they do not emphasize it, but they take it for granted. When you say that someone is practically wise, you should see him doing something. And doing something is always involved in the exercise of some ethical virtue. So there are no things, let's say, there are no doings which correspond to practical wisdom. Stop. There are always doings that correspond to practical wisdom in practicing justice, in practicing friendship, in practicing something. And I think this is the best way to understand the mutual dependence between practical wisdom and the ethical virtues. So the next problem they meet, and everyone meets, is the following. So should we first acquire ethical virtues and then practical wisdom? Mario and Maria respond, no, this is impossible, and they are not alone. And I agree with them. There is no way to cultivate the ethical virtues independently from the cultivation of practical wisdom. So there should be a way to do it in parallel at the same time. That's why I offer that proposal today and say that if you take practical wisdom to be one thing, a general expertise, it's impossible to explain how there must be a development of that expertise. But if you differentiate it in different spokes, then you can say, in order for children to be better, let's say, cultivated in terms of phonetic perception, maybe situations that demand, for example, courage could be more suitable. In order, however, to understand their life as a whole, challenges that have to do with friendship might be more appropriate. In order to cultivate that other spoke of practical wisdom, another ethical virtue might be of need. So I think there is a way to correlate spokes of practical wisdom with particular ethical virtues. What I offer today is the following. We usually go from the ethical virtues to practical wisdom. I say no, the better strategy is to differentiate the spokes of practical wisdom, and from that point, find a way to differentiate the virtues. So find the ethical virtues that are more appropriate for each spoke of practical wisdom. And so there is no problem of unity. You begin with practical wisdom, you differentiate it in spokes, and then you correlate them with ethical virtues. And I think you can propose a model of how to develop practical wisdom and ethical virtues at the same time. That's the main idea. That's the main idea. I don't think there is any way to fully dissociate practical wisdom and ethical virtues. But they have right. You cannot accept the very strong claim by Aristotle, Plato, and all the ancients that there is a perfect unity of virtues. Once you have one of them, you have all of them. With my proposal, you solve that problem too. Because if you don't have experience in a particular domain, then you may have practical wisdom, but not experience in that domain. So you do not have that ethical virtue. I think there is a way to insert flexibility and differentiation, validation within practical wisdom. That's the main point of today's talk.
Many thanks. I think for everybody, it was clear your speech now, more clear.
Thank you. It is now 20 years we have not met. It was a nice opportunity to meet, at least on screen.
If I may, I have a question myself. First, let me tell you, Pavlos, it was 2006, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
So it's slightly less than you said. However, too much. Okay, many thanks. I have many questions, but I try to keep it not too long. The first concerns the last point you touched, meaning your position concerning the unity of the virtues and the implications of your view for the interpretation of the unity of the virtues. And because it seems to me I mean, I was very fascinated by the way you link the acquisition of each spoke to the idea that each spoke requires some ethical virtues to be developed. But that seems to me to strengthen or to reinforce an idea of a strong unity of the virtues thesis, because in order to be called practically wise, then I understand that one should be entirely virtuous, or he would lack one or more spokes. And the whole idea of virtue molecularism, that is, at least to me, the part that we still need to develop more of our account, because it's just a hint we made at the end of one of our papers, but we need to develop it, was to get rid of the strong unity of the virtues thesis and claiming that, of course, one has to be somehow virtuous in some domains, but this is compatible with being in the process of acquiring ethical expertise, or even with being already ethically competent or practically wise, because you have a certain expertise in a relevant number of domains, and you acknowledge that you're lacking or not perfect in other domains, but you know that. So you're aware of your shortcomings. And that's our initial suggestion of a virtue molecularism. That's more or less the idea. So the first question would be, doesn't your view that ethical virtues relate directly to spokes reinforce a strong unity of the virtue thesis?
Not necessarily. I tried to be more modest than that. I said certain ethical virtues make it easier or quicker to acquire practical wisdom. I did not want to say that the acquisition of practical wisdom depends necessarily on all virtues. I said that we can make a developmental story and use certain virtues as better vehicles for acquiring practical wisdom, not that they are indispensable. So you can substitute a virtue with another, but it might require more energy, more time, more difficult tasks, and then, however, have the same outcome. But if you want to make an educational plan, you should suggest, I suppose, the best, the faster, quicker, more safe, as you like, path in order to attain the end, which is the acquisition of practical wisdom. But my proposal lets space for the idea that you might not have experience in a very particular domain and still be practically wise. I think that my interpretation of Aristotle's legislation is very important in that respect. So even though you are practically wise in Aristotle, you are not yet ready for making legislation, because you need a very specific kind of expertise, or excuse me, of experience. This does not diminish your being practically wise. It just requires something more. So I think that, by contrast, my proposal helps you resolve better, let's say, or more convincingly, the problem of the unity of virtues. Okay.
Thanks. No, many thanks. I'd like to reply, but I don't want to bother you on this point. Okay, so, well, my second question you already answered, I gather, because it was if, in your view, enkrateia, hope the accent, right, can be seen as a stage in the acquisition of practical wisdom, as many claim and others deny. So we're on the same page here.
Yes.
And the third was on exemplars, because it's very interesting that you take the spectator's perspective, which Mario is right, kind of resembles our way of taking the interpreter's standpoint, but there you offer criteria to or an analysis of who the spectator is or what it's required for being a spectator, which is something we didn't take into account. So it's very interesting. But the idea with what's your view concerning Zagzebski's proposal that exemplars are prior to any conceptualization and prior to the possession of any kind or degree of virtue, and they can trigger a process toward virtue acquisition? She appeals to empirical evidence or psychological evidence that an emotion such as admiration for moral traits do exist. And so that there can be a genuine reaction when one is exposed to moral exemplars, even in absence of any kind of virtuous character. But you seem to claim that this is not the case. And I tend to agree with you that some kind of prerequisite is necessary in order for someone to pick someone as an exemplar. But I'd like to know your opinion on that.
Yes, exactly that. I don't agree with her. And I think that the best source for this kind of questions is Aristotle's rhetoric. That's my, let's say, new suggestion. We read Nicomachean Ethics, the Nicomachean Ethics, we read the Politics, we usually forget the rhetoric. And the rhetoric is the best source for that kind of questions. Why? Because it's about spectators, it's about judges, it's about people who hear and should just understand what is going on. So I think that it's wrong to claim that there is a true, let's say, recognition of moral exemplars without any ethical virtue. And my proposal was just that. You need less ethical virtue than, say, not so high level of ethical virtues as in the case of phronêsis. You need something less than that. Nevertheless, a bad person or someone without any understanding of nobility can have no access to moral exemplars. You can use them in early age too, but that would be another kind of imitation, not the kind we need as a stage in a developmental story about the acquisition of practical wisdom. It will be another kind of admiration, not, let's say, a fully rational comprehension of nobility. Aristotle has not the means to differentiate these kind of things. He has some things to say about children, but it's not too interesting, let's say. So my answer is that you need something, some ethical, some good ethical states. That's the way to phrase it. Not say necessarily ethical virtues, some good ethical states. Not to be vicious, not to be beast-like, not to be totally akolastos in Aristotle's terms. That's all. That's all.
Great, thanks.
Don't forget that for Aristotle, if you are akolastos or beast-like, you cannot even hear and understand the Nicomachean Ethics at all. You can understand nothing.
Well, but according to Aristotle, I am not able to understand the Nicomachean Ethics as well because I'm a woman. So we made a part from him at some point.
Yes, we let that aside.
But maybe he was right. So other questions? I can't see more raised hands, but.
Can I ask a simple one?
Yes.
So I'm not entirely sure I got the last exchange you had with Maria Silvia, but so if I got it right, the problem with the role of exemplars is that unless you already have some good ethical state, you are in some good ethical state, you cannot learn enough from exemplars, or what's the specific? What am I missing there? Why?
I would say you cannot understand the true attractiveness of these exemplars. In Aristotle's terms, you cannot understand the nobility inherent in these exemplars.
Okay, yeah.
You can follow them, you can learn that they are exemplary, you can obey them, but there is yet no access to their true nobility, what they make them, what make them to be truly moral exemplars.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm wondering whether, if you're right, then what it follows, and maybe it's already standard and basic in Aristotle. I was not sure it is, but that's why I'm asking. Then moral exemplars end up never being the right way to get to practical wisdom, or at least to the virtues, maybe, because I mean, if you already are in those good ethical states, you probably won't need won't need that much those exemplars, right? Because you already, I mean, you can, in some specific cases, maybe there's a tricky situation and you already have some good, I mean, you're in a good starting position, but then you will not be able to, I mean, you will apply, you will see what the exemplar does, and you will apply the exemplar situation to your situation, but you already are in the right path.
Yes, you need to be already in the right path in order to understand them in Aristotle. But there is a nice passage in the Nicomachean Ethics, book 10, chapter 9 about that. The passage says, if you are not already well cultivated in some way, there is no access to the noble at all. So I would not put moral exemplars and their use at the beginning, let's say, of habituation towards practical wisdom, but somewhere in the middle way.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah. I mean, I'm wondering whether then you don't need them.
You need them. I mean, you need them because things become very complicated once you acquire the first necessary spokes of practical wisdom. And in the same way, you need always an expert besides you in the crafts. You need a moral exemplar in cases of phronetic perception, for example, when circumstances are very difficult to understand the salient features of the situation, when moral demands are very ambiguous, and you need the phronimos to be there and show you, not to teach you anymore, but show you how he or she understands the situation and how he acts or she acts. So you need them. You need them throughout your life, you know. If we take practical wisdom to be an almost inaccessible perfection for human beings, then you need them always.
If I then I'll stop. But I was wondering then if the role of the exemplar becomes somewhat, I mean, closer to simply being someone who's slightly more experienced, or if has been the lack of finding themselves in a situation you haven't found yourself yet.
That would be a case, yes. So in the rhetoric, Aristotle distinguishes young people from old people in terms of experience, but experience in the sense of having experienced strokes of good or bad luck and things like that. Not experience of something that has made you more flexible, more accurate in your phonetic perception.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
You know, for instance, if you hear something new in music, which is, people find it very a true novelty, they cannot assess it yet. They cannot understand whether it is really good or stupid, whether it's a new contribution to music or nothing. And then you need perception. You need someone who has the sensibility to really understand the particulars. And this would be, in moral matters, the case of the phronimos.
Sorry. Can I add something to this?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Are we? Do you have time?
Maria decides.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So this passage remind me the puzzle about habituation in economic ethics.
Which passage?
The passage, the puzzle about habituation.
Yes.
Book 2 of Nicomachean Ethics, when Aristotle say that we became just by doing just actions. The question is, if you do just action, we are just already. But the answer is that we are not just, because we can do the just actions, but this does not imply that you are virtue, you possess the virtues of justice. In order to possess the virtue, to be the virtue of justice, you need to have an understanding of why it is just to do a certain thing, and so on. So so this is just to make a point that to stress that I agree with your reading on this aspect, that that you can of course doing just actions or being in a good state, but this does not imply that you possess virtues.
Yes. But the difficult thing, thank you very much. The difficult thing is to really describe what a good ethical state is when it is not yet a full ethical virtue. So it's difficult to describe that mid path between, let's say, neutral ethical states and ethical virtues. You should do it some way, but it's not easy. So I proposed a way to describe that mid stage of ethical states. There are many ways. It's a very big discussion today. There are many papers the last years on that topic. There is a paper by Jimenez in phronêsis. There is a paper by Hampson in Archiv für Geschichte der Philosophie. There is a paper by Hornmiller in a volume which appeared in Berlin. There are many things. If you have read some of them, I more in line with Hampson's argument. That's the point. Is there any other question? Thanasis had a question.
Who is Thanasis?
Samaras from Georgia.
Hi everyone. It's morning for me, so I very much enjoyed the paper, Pavlos. I have a question which might be simple for you, but let me see if I get this right. So you are saying that, or let me start from this. You are defending a certain type of unity of virtue, right? And the way you do that is to say that phronêsis somehow correlates with the individuality, but it's only a question of not having the opportunity to like actualize it in certain areas. That means it's not actual in those, but so a consequence of that would be that if this person is given the opportunity, they will do it. If they are given, that's your position. So essentially you agree that in the Nicomachean Ethics specifically, there is unity of virtue.
I would not be so strict about that, Thanasis. I would say the following. You can be practically wise in your life, even though in some domains of action you did not yet have the opportunity to exercise the relevant virtues.
Pavlo, is this my fault somehow, or is it just circumstances?
No, it's not your fault. It's my fault. So, and I mean the following. I had to
if I'm an Aristotelian agent and I haven't done it, it's because I'm not good enough, or because I never, like, the opportunity didn't occur. I live in a bad city or something.
So
Badly
you may live
governed.
in a bad city, and you don't have, for example, experience in taking rule, for example. You may be practically wise in your private life or in your household. I think there is no impediment for that. Then once you find yourself in a city where you are allowed to rule, are you able to exercise practical wisdom immediately? No. My answer is no. My answer is that you need the relevant experience. So you need first to see how things work in a city where there is a good constitution or things like that. And after that, you will certainly acquire practical wisdom, but without the experience relevant to the domain, you cannot. But for the ethical virtues, this is not the same problem, because I don't think that Aristotle supposes that there are people who have never have experience of circumstances requiring courage, for example. How can you say that a human life has no experience of what requires Andrea, courage? It's impossible, because courage is not something you exercise only in the battle. You exercise it in everyday life, Aristotle says. So it would be, let's say, counterintuitive to say that someone is practically wise, but he never had the opportunity to exercise courage in his life still. There might be other kinds of ethical virtues which have to do with more, let's say, particular or specific or how to say, domains of not everyday life in which you happen not to have the experience. But for things like friendship, generosity, courage, justice, and so on and so forth, there is no human life without the experience of these things and of the relevant desires.
Okay.
So it's not a theoretical requirement of unity. It's a very practical and everyday life idea about the fact that we are always involved in matters of justice, courage, friendship, generosity, and so on. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Pavlos.
Okay.
May I raise a question?
Okay, sorry, Michele, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
No, actually, it was not a
there was no hand. Yes.
No, there was no hand. You are perfectly right. Only if there is a few minutes left. Do we have them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it's a short question. It's just a question out of curiosity and concerning the issue that we were already talking just a few minutes ago, of the connection between moral exemplarity and habituation. I am very puzzled by the possibility of cases in which we don't have the linear continuity that we are used to think between the formation of a moral exemplary figure and the habituation that leads to that. I'm thinking to cases such as St. Paul on the way to Damascus. He was not supposed before that moment to be a moral exemplar, but there is a moment in his life in which everything changes. So the question is, what happens? What would the description be from an Aristotelian viewpoint? Because of course we may have a completely different kind of description from a Christian viewpoint, but what would an Aristotelian say to such a moral conversion? Because the case of moral conversion, I suppose, is quite a bit out of the Aristotelian framework, isn't it?
Well, it's a very big question, Michele, a very big one.
Yes.
I will try, however, to respond. First, when Aristotle uses exemplars, in fact, in the rhetoric, it's always for people who have lived before us. So these are not the people who live at the same time in the same city, but they are exams of the past. And for the most part, he says this should be unambiguous exams, fully clear exams of virtue. No one should doubt about them. That's why epidictic speech does not concern our decision about whether someone is an example or not. We take it for granted, and we begin from there. Now, are there everyday exams in Aristotle? Are there contemporary people who are taken to be exemplars? The only exemplar in Aristotle's ethics is Pericles.
Yes.
We find him several times in the Nicomachean Ethics and the Rhetoric and the Politics. Was he a moral exemplar in the sense of a saint or someone who is beyond any doubt virtuous? No, because in fact, Pericles is an exemplar of someone who shows practical wisdom in matters of political rule. So it's a more, let's say, specific domain of exercising practical wisdom. The other reply will be the following. Aristotle seems to think that you cannot use someone as an exemplar unless he's already dead. Because you never know. You never know. Human life is very ambiguous, very delicate, very difficult to handle. And there is always the possibility to slip towards vice. It happens rarely, but it can happen in Aristotle. It can happen. Nevertheless, on the other hand, it takes time. It's not like a Christian or Kantian understanding of reversals. In Kant, there is no time in moral reversals. Either the heart changes outside time, let's say, or it does not change at all. In Aristotle, there cannot be any change unless there is much time for the change to take place. It does not happen immediately, it happens in time. It needs much time. These responses, I think, make something like a broad picture of what is happening with moral exemplars in Aristotle. It's very difficult to find them, and they are never, let's say, they are never there for the eternity. You use them at a certain time. The state, let's say, decides, takes a political decision about which are the exemplars now, and you are allowed to use them in epidictic speech or in public speech or in education. Nothing guarantees that they will remain exemplars forever.
Yeah,
I think this is a nice idea. Exemplars should not be there forever. Life changes, morals change, our view and our needs change. Moral exemplars should change too. I think Aristotle has that kind of flexibility.
That's
I
interesting.
take it to be an advantage of his way of understanding moral exemplars.
Yeah, because it's compatible with the idea of moral progress.
Exactly.
That's a very interesting
And
point.
fluidity and the needs. There are needs of political life. If we speak from the standpoint of education, for example, and habituation, there are needs. Every city has its own needs at every new, let's say, time of its development. So we need different exemplars for different uses at different moments.
Okay.
A very earth kind understanding of exemplars.
May I just add one little point, is that the case of St. Paul is quite embarrassing because it seems that we have in front of us a character who from a certain point on is a moral exemplar, but he wasn't before that moment. So the question is, how about his virtues or something like the virtues before the moment of moral conversion? It seems that he did have some sort of capacities that we may not call the virtues before the moral conversion, because phronêsis was badly applied. But then when he realizes what is the right way, he goes and applies phronêsis, and what were raw capacities only before that moment become the virtues. And here I believe there is something that we should say that wasn't said so much, or maybe I missed it, concerning the general view of the good of the agent, that is eudaimonia. We have been talking pretty much about phronêsis, about virtues, but not much about eudaimonia as being the general framework. And
you are completely
is
right.
what is missing in the case of St. Paul. And after that, there is something that replaces eudaimonia in Christian terms.
Yes. Okay, I totally agree with you. It's a very big new discussion, because once you enter, once you insert the concept of eudaimonia, of happiness, let's say, then you can understand life as a whole. If you have not that, you cannot speak about life as a whole. Then the question is what Aristotle means by life as a whole. And there are plenty of answers to that question. And there is a very nice book, a recent book by Richard Kraut, who discusses in some 20 pages or even more what a complete life or life as a whole means in Aristotle. I don't agree with him. Nevertheless, he nicely presents the discussion at least. But there is a, let's say that, there is a big difference, an abyssal difference between Aristotle and the theological or even the Kantian understanding of what is life as a whole. There is an abyss there, there is a gap. There is a very big gap. And if I had to choose, the truth is that I would choose the Aristotelian option.
We suspected that.
If you hear me to speak about Kant, you may suspect the other thing, but now I speak about Aristotle. Yes, I'm Aristotelian, I think that he's right. He's right, but it's not easy, because Aristotle does not have yet a narrative idea of the self, and so it's very difficult to understand how to construct life as a whole. I think there are many ways to do it, but you have to use, I think, the Aristotelian ideas of the past and the future in human life in order to understand how this can work. It's a very interesting question as far as I can see.
Thank you very much.
I thank you.
So I don't see any more raised hands or questions pending. So I guess we can thank again very much Pavlos for his great talk, and all of you for this very nice discussion. And I have pasted...
One thing, Maria Silvia.
Yeah.
Let's ask, do you object, Pavlos, if we put the recording of this talk online in our website?
No, no problem, no problem.
Right. So this will be put there soon.
I have a question to you, Mario and Maria. Do you think that I correctly presented your virtue molecularism, or I missed something?
As far as I can say, you had a very nice way of putting it. I would have liked to write down, because at some point it was clearer to you than to me.
That's nice. That's nice. It happens always. It happens always with external viewers. Yes.
And also you have a very nice integrations to it. So
yeah, and very nice integration, especially on the cluster part, which is, as I said, probably the less developed. So yeah, I'd say so.
Thank you.
Let's send us the paper also.
Okay.
Okay, so many thanks to everybody. And the next meeting of our series will be on December 17. We'll have Nancy Snow from the University of Oklahoma. The link is the same to participate. And if someone of you would like to receive there's someone waiting in the waiting room. Okay. If not in our mailing list, please send me your email address and we'll include you. However, I've shared the link to the events page where you can find all next meetings and speakers. Okay, so thank you, everybody.
I thank you all for the nice discussion.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.